Good day. It's Wednesday, July the 21st. I'm Martin Gago with Market Radius Research. Today we've got Blaine Monaghan, CEO of Pacific Ridge Exploration. Pacific Ridge's flagship project is the advanced stage Kliyul, I think I got that about right, Copper-Gold Project located in the Quesnel Trough, about 50 kilometers from Centerra Gold's Kemess project. Thanks everyone for joining us today. This is the first installment of our mining for morons here. So I appreciate Blaine taking the time for me and to educate a little bit on what they're doing. This is not a recommendation or investment advice. We're here to learn about the company, do your due diligence, invest cautiously, only invest what you can afford to lose in the venture markets, and remember to always diversify. Blaine, thank you very much for joining us. And let's hear about Pacific Ridge Exploration.
Perfect. And sound advice, Martin. I mean, it's like in the subscription agreements, they make it pretty clear now that you could lose all of your money. So yeah, very high risk, high reward opportunities here, especially with the junior mining stocks. And we are that, but I think we've mitigated the risk somewhat with our team and the stage of our projects and where we're located.
All right.
Forward-looking statements, I'm not going to bore everybody to tears with that, so please read at your leisure, but it almost goes back to what we're saying, very risky. This is high level. This is kind of what Pacific Ridge is all about. We are a junior exploration company focused on copper-gold projects in BC. Our goal is to become one of BC's leading copper-gold exploration companies. Historically, Pacific Ridge has been focused on gold in the Yukon. It's forayed out into other Canadian jurisdictions for other commodities, but for the most part, Pacific Ridge's home is in the Yukon and British Columbia. And as a matter of fact, it's one of the oldest companies on the venture. I believe it listed in 1979. It was founded by one of my mentors, John Brock. I actually worked with Pacific Ridge and John Brock from 2003 to 2007. And I joined the board in 2017. So actually, I have a very long history with Pacific Ridge. I've always been impressed by the people that have led the company, and that would include John Brock. Gordon Davis was the former executive chairman who I worked with at Camplatz, and now, of course, Jerry Carlson. I replaced Jerry Carlson in January of this year, so I am the new CEO and president. Jerry is a PhD geologist, has a very strong technical background, and I think that's one of the great things about our company. It is science driven. We have a very strong technical team. We have a very attractive share structure and valuation. I think Jerry did a really good job of keeping the share structure intact during this past bear mining market that lasted almost 8 years. So today we only have 53 million shares issued, so that's quite attractive, and we only have about a 12 million valuation and about 2.8 million in cash. Our focus
is Blaine. I just your comment on being one of the longest listed TSX venture stories. It kind of reminds me of Kevin Costner and Bull Durham being one of the longest guys down in the rookie leagues, and the fact I presume there have been some rollbacks over the 40-ish plus years, but in the current state you're in, that's a very reasonable share structure.
Yeah, exactly. And it's increased by about 20 million shares just this past year. When I joined on, we had about 34 million shares issued, but we were looking to raise money for the Kliyul program, which is our first drill program at Kliyul. And we raised, $1.1 million at 14 cents. We raised another 1.5 at 15 cents. And today we're trading around, 24. So it's been a pretty good return for those initial shareholders, which were largely funds at that point in time. I was talking a little bit about the history of Pacific Ridge and principally Yukon gold focus. We actually still have a portfolio of Yukon gold projects, but I think you'll see us spin those out over time, look to unlock some additional value. We pivoted last year to these copper gold projects in BC, and the timing was fantastic. We acquired them from Centerra. The deal was finalized in January of last year, and at the time, copper was trading slightly north of $2. So very good terms. I don't think we'd be able to get the same terms today. I mean, copper now is doubled since that time, and there's a lot more interest in copper gold projects in BC, as you can see by some of those bullet points below. that the new entity, Northwest Copper, Newmont acquiring GT Gold, and the A-Mark Freeport McMoran agreement. And I think we're going to continue to see that much more interest in these sort of projects in BC, not only as a result of increased demand for copper, as a result of the electrification of everything, but because a lot of the more prolific copper jurisdictions in the world, like Peru and copper, I think it's going to get more expensive. There's going to be those governments going to be looking for even more of a take. So I think we're going to see that many more companies looking to BC to conduct exploration and look to start up copper mining operations.
I don't know if you're going to get into your Yukon projects later on in the presentation. Like obviously with the great timing with the copper and where that's gone. Is there gold's been a little morose for the last year, but at the same time it's still $1,800 here. What were there's nothing wrong with a good gold play. Why the sort of pivot or the addition of the copper in BC?
Yeah, last year, I think it was because, frankly, when you're looking at, we have 3 gold projects in portfolio. The most advanced stage was Mariposa. And Pacific Ridge spent about $7 million on that project from 2009 to 2012 during kind of the latest iteration of the Yukon Gold Rush, where we saw probably more than $1 billion raised and spent in the Yukon on exploration. There were some new discoveries, but come 2012, that was the beginning of the bear market, and there just wasn't that much interest in gold at that time, let alone the Yukon. So we had those projects on the books. I still think Mariposa and the other projects are pretty attractive, but when you think about what our focus is today for Pacific Ridge, I do want to remain focused on copper gold projects in BC. We may look at other jurisdictions moving forward, but principally North America. And I just want to be really focused on that. So we've got these orphan projects that are somewhat stranded in Pacific Ridge's structure right now. So I just think it would make good sense to spin them out. I think we're one gold project acquisition away from creating a viable entity. So that's something we're looking at right now, is making another attractive gold project acquisition in either Yukon or BC, and then start that process.
And sorry, and then spin out the gold or sell off the gold portfolio to someone else, or in a spinco kind of a thing?
Yeah, like spin it out into a new co. Exactly. Yeah. And we would still provide the management, but I think it would provide greater upside for both Pacific Ridge shareholders and Newco shareholders. We just have a real focus on that specific commodity type.
Yeah, well, finance theory would say having 2 focused sort of directions and 2 separate companies is better value than having it all mashed together in one. So it makes sense to me.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the timing's right. I mean, to your point, I mean, 1,800 gold is great. But not much love in the junior gold stocks right now. Although the capital is available. The capital started becoming available, again, really in earnest last year. So there is money out there. We haven't seen any tremendously big new discoveries yet, but we're early in the cycle. I mean, we've just emerged from an 8-year bear market, which was one of the longest and deepest in probably anybody's living memory. It was really tough out there. But for companies like us that have emerged and have a great team and some great projects, I think the next few years are looking absolutely fantastic.
All right.
Okay, back to the management. Again, I don't want to bore everybody to death here by saying how great we are, but I'll let you look at that at your leisure. But we've assembled a great team that are experts in their own respective disciplines. A very good, strong, independent board. We just ordered Gary Baschuk recently. So he's with Pear Tree. He's very strong technically. And just before Gary, we added Borden Putnam. And I want to focus on Borden a little bit because he's one of these individuals that's a little rare in our industry. Somewhat like Gary also. Gary came from the sell, he's technical. He went to the sell side and now he remains with Pear Tree. Borden, again, very technical, but he went to the buy side. He was a buy side analyst with a number of large U.S. funds. I approached him in February about joining the board and he was quite interested. He liked the team. He liked the projects, what we were up to. What he was looking for, though, to join the board was that I want to form a technical committee and I want to lead it. And I thought, well, that's a great idea. That the more technical brain power looking at this project and how to tackle it, great. So I'd say our technical.
Sorry, Blaine, could you just maybe give us 30 seconds or a minute on your background?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so I've been around on the mining side now for at least 20 years. I got started with Wheaton River Minerals at the bottom of the last cycle, which would have been 2001.
Yeah.
So this would have been after Bre-X, during the tech boom and the tech blow up. And I started with a company called Wheaton River Minerals, which was essentially a cash-rich shell that Frank Giustra and his cohorts acquired. And that became his flagship project to re-enter into the gold mining space after exiting it at the peak. So his timing was superb. He exited it at the peak. He got back in at the bottom with Wheaton River Minerals, which became Goldcorp. So they acquired a number of assets. So I've been involved in the mining industry since 2001. I've worked with about a dozen companies so far, and half of those have been subject to M&A. So I've been really lucky to work with a lot of good people, with a lot of good projects, and it's worked out quite well for me and shareholders on many occasions. And that's one of the reasons why I like Pacific Ridge. I think just when I came on, it was a 5-cent stock. It had a 1.2 million market cap. I knew that there was a lot more value to be had, and since that time, we've our market cap has increased 10 times, and the share price has risen about 400 or 500%, and I still think we have a long way to go.
All right. Well, I got to say, like a 50% sort of hit rate or win rate in the junior mining sector in your resume. That's very decent.
It's okay.
Good for.
I want more. I want another one. I want another one. It was that bear market was really tough. So yeah. So a great technical committee for a company of this size, and more importantly, really a strong focus on porphyry projects, deposits in BC. So obviously Borden leads it. You've got Craig Hart, Jim Logan, who is a former senior geologist with the BC Ministry of Mines, Dan Core, and then on the management side, Jerry and Danette. So I think we've got a really strong technical committee. And these just aren't names on paper. They meet, at least once a month, and their most recent meeting was just 2 weeks ago to sort of finalize the drill plan for Kliyul, and we're mobilizing in there right now. And I expect that we should have an announcement out in the next week talking about the start of drilling. So we talked a little bit about the share structure. I think one of the key things here is obviously that the share structure is in pretty good shape. The valuation is pretty attractive. We have more than enough cash to complete the drill program at Kliyul this year. We've budgeted about $2 million for that program. So we should end the year with several $100,000. But and I'll talk about this also in the Yukon project side, we're also due $1 million at the end of the year from another partner up in the Yukon for a project called Fire Lake. And I fully expect them to make that payment. They've already paid us $2 million. And this is the final payment for them to get to 100% of that project. One of the other things I really like about Pacific Ridge is our shareholder registry. So it's a very good balance between funds and institutions, retail and management. So Delphi is a German fund. They actually approached us in February about wanting to invest. So we did a charitable flow-through financing with them. So they were the end buyer. So we raised $1.1 million at 14.2 cents, and they took all of that. So they've got 14% of the company. Then Crescat, who characterized themselves as an activist investor, are based in Colorado. We just raised $1.5 million, and they were the lead order for that. And then you've got a number of other smaller funds and institutions, and then insiders in the balance retail. So a very good mix. I think we've seen a lot of turnover just in this past 6 months, as you can sort of see, going from 5 cents to 30 odd cents. Probably you've had a lot of new shareholders come in. And important to keep in mind that Pacific Ridge it had been largely, trading under 10 cents for the last 5 or 6 years. So this is a good time for a lot of the previous existing shareholders who are finally in the green and making some money, which is good.
Blaine, just for any rookie mining folk watching this, could you very briefly what a charitable flow through is? That's not common outside the mining world.
Yeah, it's probably one of the greatest financing tools available to junior miners. So obviously the natural resources in Canada, the wealth of our nation is based on resource and resource extraction, and the Canadian government recognizes that a tremendous amount of jobs, wealth, tax can be created from the discovery of these deposits and when they become mines. So they have a scheme where basically you can raise money via flow through shares, and typically it's done at a premium to market. So let's just say it's 10 cents. You might be able to do a flow through share financing at 13 cents, and a percentage of your investment is tax deductible, and that's why your company is able to do it at a premium. But a charitable flow through is like a double whammy. So not only do you get that tax deduction because it's a flow through share, but if you then donate it, then you get the charitable tax advantage also. So basically, you are able to, if you're 10 cents and instead of basically doing maybe a 12-cent flow through financing, your charitable flow through financing might be at 14 cents. So it's obviously, again, a recognition by the Canadian government that these sort of exploration companies in Canada, if they have success, it can be a tremendous benefit to Canadian tax holders.
All right.
A little bit on the project portfolio. All of our projects are located in BC and Yukon. Really what we're just going to focus on today is our copper-gold projects, our copper-gold porphyry projects in BC. I talked a little bit about the Yukon project. So Fire Lake is that one that's farmed out to BMC, that private British company. And as I've mentioned, they've already given us $2 million. There's a final $1 million payment due at the end of the year. And then we talked a little bit about Mariposa, Eureka, and Gold Cap. So I'd like to spin those out, but we're looking for one more gold asset to make that viable. And I think once we acquire that project, we'll put that in place and get it started. Kliyul is a flagship. We acquired Kliyul and Redton from Centerra last year. It was a package deal. And we recently acquired RDP. We acquired that just a couple months. And one of the advantages to RDP, it's a pretty interesting project. It's returned some pretty good drill results and surface results with respect to copper gold. But one of the real advantages to RDP is it's only about 40 kilometers away from our Kliyul. So while we're drilling Kliyul this year and have a camp in place there, we'll just be helicoptering crews back and forth. I mean, you've already sunk your cost with your camp. So it's going to really reduce your exploration cost at RDP. So we won't be drilling RDP this year, but we will be conducting some surface sampling, some mapping, and doing some IP to refine some targets. And if we like what we see, and I expect we will, we'll start the permitting process later this year and look to get in there with the drill program next year. So you can see where we are. We're in the Quesnel Trough, and I mean the Quesnel Trough is several kilometers, several thousand kilometers long. We're in the northwestern part of it. If you're to look down, say where Mount Milligan is at the southern end of this image, if you're just to go, a little bit to the east, that's where Mackenzie is. So we're north of Prince George here. From our Kliyul to Prince George, it's about 400 or 500 kilometers on forestry service roads. We're lucky because the infrastructure here is actually quite good. When you're looking in this region, northwestern BC, we are just 5 kilometers off a Forest Service road that services Centerra's Kemess to the north, and there's also power. So although this year it'll be a helicopter supported campaign, and we'll have a camp up there. If you have success, infrastructure won't be as much of a challenge. It wouldn't be that difficult to drive in a road from that forestry service road in Kliyul. So it's a great part of the world. It's been getting busier and busier. We're seeing a lot of activity, and yeah, we're looking forward to getting started.
So just rough between Kliyul and RDP, about how many kilometers is that? And then about from there to Redton, about how far is that?
Yeah, so Kliyul to RDP, it's about it's approximately 40 kilometers as the crow flies, and then Kliyul to Redton, you're looking at several hundred kilometers from there.
All right.
Well, yeah, about 150, I'd say. Kliyul, we talked a little about the infrastructure, the option deal with Centerra for both Kliyul and Redton is to earn up to 75%, and it's very easy considering, well, the terms are very easy considering where copper is today. It's 3.5 million shares, 7 million in exploration expenditures, and only 160,000 cash, and that's for both projects. So very, very, very manageable. And again, I don't think you'd be getting those terms today. So our timing was very good.
And sorry, what is your current ownership in Kliyul?
The current ownership, so it's Centerra. It's Centerra 100%.
Oh, okay. So you're at that. That's the option, and then to get up to 75. And there's no option for that remaining 25%. That's theirs if you want it. You'd have to negotiate that.
That is there. I would certainly like to try to get it, and have approached it about saying, hey, listen, is there the opportunity to go to 100%? I haven't heard much from them, but I think that's because they're very busy on other fronts. They're involved in a big dispute with the Kyrgyzstan government with one of their principal mines. So this is just not on the radar screen right now.
Yeah.
But if you have success, that could mean you might have a built-in partner that may look to do something else if you're having success. So not necessarily a bad thing, but obviously always nice to have that optionality to go to 100%. It gives you a lot more flexibility.
Do you have any, let's say when you get to the 75% and you need to raise more money to invest in exploration or development, do they have any right to sort of maintain their 25%, or can they get diluted out, or do they have any obligation to sort of co-invest?
Yeah, it's like many of these things. Once you get to that joint venture point where you've earned your percentage, the minority partner then has to pony up their percentage or get diluted down.
All right.
One of the other reasons we love this project, geologically, it's very similar to a lot of other porphyry deposits and mines in BC, and which is fantastic, especially when you look at, say, Saddle North, which is GT Gold. That was just recently acquired by Newmont for over 450 million. So there, again, a lot of interest in these sort of projects, not only from copper producers, but also gold companies. If you are a gold producer, we know that big discoveries are increasingly rare. They, a number of decades ago, you had to have a 10 million ounce deposit. Then it was 5 million. Then it was 3. Now it's kind of, north of 1 million ounce deposit might get you acquired by a mid-tier or senior. So if you're a senior gold producer, these porphyries also have, even though they might be copper dominant, can kick off a large amount of annual gold production. So I wouldn't be surprised to see more senior gold producers acquiring these sort of porphyries where gold is almost a byproduct, but because you're dealing with such large tonnage, it can still be quite significant. Now we call it advanced stage, and I don't think it's necessarily fair to say it's advanced stage. I mean, it's only seen 33 drill holes, so there is porphyry mineralization there. It has been discovered, but we're quite a ways off from saying there's a resource here.
And so there's no resource estimate or anything like that.
No, so that's, by that definition, I'd say it's early stage. So I mean, there has been a number of campaigns here. It has been drilled by a number of companies. But it was only up until 2006 that the porphyry system or porphyry mineralization was first identified. And then Teck followed it up in 2015 with 4 deeper holes. And these are some of the highlight holes here I show here. So that KL630, that would have been the first hole that was drilled deep enough to get into that porphyry mineralization, and it returned, 218 meters of 0.79 copper equivalent. And then the hole below that, KJ 1534, was drilled by Teck, and they did that in 2015. They put in four more deeper holes, and I'll show a drill table later. But these are pretty good widths and pretty good grades. And I know when I was first introducing Pacific Ridge and Kliyul to some investors in January, February, they weren't terribly impressed by these grades. And I started thinking, well, I'm comparing this to other deposits and mines in BC. So how do those grades stack up? And I'll have another slide I'll show you, but they compare quite favorably. But I'll show you that in a moment. So we've done a lot of work here since acquiring it in January. And we also conducted, so we didn't drill it last year, but we did do some deeper penetrating IP. And that identified what we think is the potential to expand that mineralization at depth, and also identified 2 new adjacent targets. And another important consideration when you're looking at porphyry deposits, they do tend to occur in clusters. So we have a number of other targets that extend along a 4-kilometer long mineralized trend. So there's more, the Kliyul main zone is just one target, which has seen the most work, but there are a number of other underexplored targets along a 4-kilometer long mineralized trend. And we'll be doing some more work there this year, looking to further refine those targets. That gives you a sense of the topography. And as you can see, we're at about 1,800 meters in elevation in northwestern BC. So right now, I'd say your drill campaign is limited to July to late September, early October. But as we know, if you have success, it is really just a matter of capital. So it is helicopter, will be a camp. But if we have success, then you can start thinking about, constructing a road into the camp and building more permanent structures. But right now, this is our first drill program here. So this is our first phase. So let's get the results we feel that are going to warrant making those expenditures. I have a feeling we are going to, but it's baby steps at this point in time. This just sort of shows some of these historical drill results. In the beginning, they were focused on a near-surface magnetite skarn zone, and you can sort of see like KL5 to KL93.5. It was near surface, still returning some pretty interesting widths, but it was only this hole here, the KL630, which was the first deep hole that got into the porphyry. Well, identified there was porphyry mineralization, and then Teck getting into it again in 2015. So this is going to be the first drill program since 2015, and I talked about these copper gold values. How do they compare to some of these other mines or deposits that we compare it to in BC? And quite favorably, you can see the copper values, 0.2 to 0.43. These holes are, 0.23, 0.18. Gold, from 0.26 to 0.42, and we're at 0.52, 0.53. So copper about the same, higher gold values. But again, of course, this is just based on some of these highlight holes here, but it goes to show that these grades, if we can continue to encounter them in additional drill holes and push out that footprint at depth and along strike, these sort of grades work. This is just a cross section. It's showing some of those deeper holes here. You can sort of see some of the more near surface drill holes. These holes here, KL 34, 35, the 2 scissor holes, they were drilled by Teck. And really what this is just demonstrating, we know very little here geologically. There's a lot of wide open spaces, both at depth and laterally, and that's what we're going to be looking to test this year. We talked about the IP we completed last year, so you can see that there's this deeper penetrating IP. You have this big target right in the middle of the Kliyul main zone. Some of those holes did get into it, but the thought being is that they didn't get all the way into it, that there's a lot more potential mineralization at depth and laterally. And then also we identified 2 other targets, the Kliyul West and Kliyul East adjacent targets that haven't been tested before. So when you're looking at the Kliyul main zone now, the Kliyul main zone and the Kliyul East and Kliyul West targets, it's over 1.5 kilometers in strike length. So it's quite large. We've budgeted 2,500 meters in drilling, which is a pretty, I'd say that is does an okay job for a first pass, a first phase, but a lot more drilling is required here if we have success. But at least in this program, we'll be getting back to the Kliyul main zone, drilling at least 3 holes there, and 1 hole each at Kliyul West and Kliyul East. And again, the name of the game is, we know there's mineralization there. There is a porphyry system. The drilling we do, can we expand that footprint? And if we can, then it gets exciting. And yeah, we're looking forward to getting started, as I said, and drilling should be underway within the next week or so.
Given the grades that that have been shown to date there, how big of a deposit would this have to be for it to be a sort of economical, or then to be, and I'm not too sure how you would sort of define big, how many tons of what, but like in length or in strike or whatever, how big would it have to be to get exciting?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question to answer because there are a lot of variables. You know, then you even, you know, we haven't even got to the metallurgy point of view.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you'd be needing to get hundreds of millions of tons up towards, you know, 1 billion tons. And so we're talking, you know, you're starting at several hundred up to 1 billion, somewhere in that range, which is that's a big range. So yeah, very, very difficult to answer that question right now. I think what we'd just be looking for is that demonstrating the potential for it to grow. And I think as we continue to get more results, and if they're positive results, then we can start kind of trying to put our head around that question. And it could ultimately change also if we go back to, say, this one particular slide. So some of those holes we talked about, those highlight holes, are, you know, approximately 0.75 copper equivalent. But there is the potential for even higher grade gold and copper in this deposit, which obviously can completely change your economics, and that can completely change what sort of tonnage might be necessary. So if you look at the bottom of this particular hole here, there's a dark purple unit, and that's a bornite zone. And so bornite is just, it's a mineral, but it tends to be higher in copper and gold. So if we're drilling underneath this, and if you're thinking maybe that bornite is like what's going on in here, there could be a higher grade core. So if you do get into higher grade mineralization, that totally changes the economics and you know, potential tonnage. It makes something work. So
just to be clear, that's about a little less than 100 meters deep from surface. Is that right?
No, this here. So if we go to the bottom of this hole, it's showing it bottoms at, like, I think that's 510, and the angle it's on, that would probably put you to about around 450 from surface.
Okay, gotcha.
But I think it's also important to show or point out also. So the deepest holes drilled here were about 500 meters. We are planning about, you know, 2,500 meters in 5 holes, you know, so an average of 500 meters. But the rig can go down to 800 meters, and I imagine some of the holes we drill will be pushing that sort of length. If we like what we're seeing, we can keep going deeper. So that largely will be based on what the geologists on site are seeing. If it looks like we're in mineralization, we can keep going deeper. And we'll probably, we'll you know, we have to be flexible with that budget also. If that means drilling deeper or sticking in another hole, then we do it. We're not going to be held hostage necessarily to the budget. It's going to be based on what we're seeing.
All right.
And you know what I'm going to do? I think I'm just going to finish up with Kliyul, because there's so many other things to talk about. But Kliyul, really, because that is the focus. Kliyul represented a big pivot for Pacific Ridge last year, from being focused on principally gold projects into the Yukon to copper-gold projects in BC. The timing was fantastic. Copper, you know, having doubled in price since that acquisition. And Kliyul, because it has returned, we know there is porphyry mineralization there, and it's returned significant intervals and good grades, and there's a lot more potential to outline, you know, potentially a new discovery here. Not only at Kliyul, but a number of these other targets that have not been drilled. So we're really excited to get in there. We have the budget, and drilling should be starting up in the next week, and with a 50 million, approximately 53 million shares issued, trading at 24 cents, a market cap of 12 million. If we have success here, I could see us trading in multiples of that on those drill results, if they're good. Yeah.
All right. What are is there a lot of drilling going on right now? I know, like the assay labs, are you expecting them to be really backed up this year, or is it going to be a little quieter than last year for us to get results out?
Really hard to say. Getting back to, the conversation about a bear and bull market, I mean, obviously things were really quiet up until about last year, and companies were able to start accessing capital to advance their exploration projects. Last year was one of the, probably busiest years since the height of the bull market, over 10 years ago. The labs weren't ready for that. And so they were very, very backed up. I would hope that the labs have responded to the expected level of activity this year. But I think, again, it's going to be even busier this year than it was last year. So I'm going to think it's going to be pretty slow. And also, like everything, as I'm sure everybody's aware, there's a real labor problem. It doesn't matter whether you want a barista or core cutter or an accountant. It's hard to fill positions. So I am expecting that to be the case. I know our costs are higher than what we were expecting, and we're having to pay a lot more than we might have, just because it's hard getting people. So I would expect there to be delays. So if we finish this program, let's say we finish up mid-September, I wouldn't expect to see results for several months after that. I think the only question is strategically, are you going to release one hole at a time, which means that you might be able to put out a result quicker than, waiting for all of them to be done. But that's a little risky to do that too. So at a minimum, I'd say several months from September. Yeah.
All right. Okay. With you, we're not going to go through the other projects, but so the other BC projects, you're just going to be doing some preliminary work on there, some sampling and that, nothing to get too excited about, but you're just trying to get a better hold on what you got there. Is that basically
it? Exactly. So, obviously, again, Kliyul is the focus, and we'll be drilling there. While we're drilling Kliyul, we'll have some crews going back and forth to RDP because it's so close. And but you can see sort of some of those numbers that have been returned from RDP. I mean, the one that I really like is the Roy target. 0.11 copper and 0.64 gold over 122 meters. That's the only hole that was drilled at the Roy target, and it bottomed in mineralization. So that's a very interesting target. Yeah, I'm not going to say there's lots of work to do at RDP, but we just acquired it, so we have to do our preliminary work and do some additional mapping and soils and IP. But based on those sort of numbers we're seeing, it should be drilled, and just getting it ready.
Yeah, and would that be like a 2022 possible endeavor to punch some holes in there next year? Yeah,
I certainly hope so. I mean, we talked about this earlier, having a plan A, B, C, D. So I always start with my plan A, and my plan A is that we're going to have a tremendous amount of success from the drill program at Kliyul. The share price is going to be increased, where we can access that much more capital that won't be terribly dilutive to conduct an even bigger program at Kliyul next year, and a drill program at RDP.
All right.
I always start with the best, and then.
All right. So is that kind of a wrap there, or anything else you want to dig into?
No, I mean, there really is just so much ground to cover, and that's again why I think you should just spin out those Yukon Gold projects. I think we've got a lot on our plate here with Kliyul and RDP, and we haven't even talked about Redton. And I think you'll see us make some, even more copper gold project acquisitions in the BC or Yukon or some of the Western states. So, they just get ignored. They get left behind. So our shareholders aren't benefiting from having these attractive gold projects. And again, that's why I think, it makes a lot of sense to unlock that value. We're not getting any value for them now. So I think spinning them out will create value for Pacific Ridge and its shareholders.
And the Redton, are you doing preliminary work on that this year as well, or is that more of?
Well, we'll do a little bit of work there. So obviously Kliyul has seen the most amount of drilling. That's what we're drilling this year. RDP has seen some drilling. We'll do a little more work there. Redton, as far as we were aware, it had never been drilled before until we stuck one single hole in it last year, and it made sense for us to drill it. Because Serengeti, the predecessor company of Northwest Copper, had a camp in place. The target was right off of Forestry Road, and we had some flow through, so we had to spend it. So we only drilled one target, the Redton North. The results didn't meet our expectations. It doesn't mean the target's dead or there aren't any other targets. It's just that we need to get in there again and do some, tighter, do some additional soils, infill soils. Do some additional mapping. It's the least advanced of the 3 copper gold projects in the portfolio, so it's going to require more work to build up the targets. But obviously very intriguing because it adjoins Quanica, which contains a significant resource. It's just a few kilometers away. So although I don't talk too much about Redton, obviously, just based on its location, very interesting, right next door to the Quanica deposit. And again, pretty good infrastructure for this region of the world where, it can be accessed by Forestry Road. And, infrastructure is just such an important consideration when you're out here in northwestern BC. So if you can drive to your project, that's a big advantage.
Yeah, so that Redton doesn't sound like you'd be maybe drilling it next year. That would be drilling maybe in subsequent years.
Yeah, I mean, right now, obviously, planning that we're going to have success with Kliyul, so a much bigger program at Kliyul next year, and then looking at a similar program as to what we're conducting at Kliyul this year for RDP. And Redton will continue to advance it along. But if we're really busy at both Kliyul and Redton, it's bandwidth, right? You just can't have. Yeah. So I think just being focused on Kliyul and to a lesser extent RDP is going to keep us very, very busy and has the potential to generate significant returns for shareholders.
All right. If anyone does have some questions for Blaine, type away in the Q&A, and we'll get to them. But I think we've had pretty thorough here, and So Blaine, thank you very much for taking the time to chat and see what you're doing there in Northwest in the BC North. Hopefully the forest fires aren't going to be a challenge this year. Well,
they were. And I would have actually already anticipated drilling to be underway. We were kind of targeting mobilizing in on the 15th and drilling started by the 18th. But no, there were significant fires north of Prince George that impacted our ability to mobilize. But it looks now that the danger is low and things are starting to move, and we're starting the mobilization process today. But yeah, no, there's a lot of fires. So hopefully how they've impacted us so far, that's that, and we move on.
All right, Blaine, thank you very much. We'll maybe get you back after we get some drill results out and we can see how things have progressed.
Awesome. Thanks, Martin. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Bye. Have a great day. Talk to you later.
Bye.